welcome. This is Pages Promotions, and this is our brand new television program called Indie Reads TV. This is where we focus on independent authors, their work, and other important people of the indie book world. Today I have with me Donald Levin. He is a local author to Ferndale. He writes the Martin Pruss Mystery Series in addition to a bunch of other stuff that we'll talk about today. And I'm really, really pleased that you're here. Thank you so much, Don, for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, okay, so we're having a couple little technical glitches here, so just, there we go.
Okay.
Got it. These inaugural things with technology is so much fun. So first of all, I want to say welcome and thank you for helping me out on this first, inaugural show. And I'd like to talk about the new book coming up. You have a new book out called Cold Dark Lies, which is the 6th in the Martin Pruss series.
That's correct.
So I'd really love to hear just a little bit about the book and what readers can expect.
Okay, well, this is a continuation of the Martin Pruss series, and like all the books in the series, it's a standalone mystery. Martin Pruss, at this point in his life, is a private detective, and someone comes to him and says, my brother was just discovered strung out on drugs in a sleazy motel in Ferndale, and I would like you to try and find out what happened, because my brother was a clean, living kind of guy. Wasn't on drugs, was healthy, took care of himself, so please find out what happened for me. So he takes that on. And at first he thinks it's going to be just a sort of a typical story of a young guy who takes a walk on the wild side and winds up paying a price for it. But the more he digs into the story and the more he digs into the young man's life, the more he finds out that everything is not as it seems. There are a lot of secrets and lies in his life. So he's off to the races after that. And as always with the other books, one of his major loves is his son Toby, and Toby plays a big part in this book, as he does in all of the books.
Toby is, as you know, one of my favorite characters in the books that you have in this series.
Toby's everybody's favorite character.
We've talked about this several times before, about Toby and the character and that he is inspired by your grandson, Jamie.
Yes.
So one of the things I don't think I've ever asked you before is, what's the challenge in writing Toby into the book? I know that there are a lot of pleasant, wonderful, happy things about adding him into the book. It's a great way for Jamie to live on,
right,
and that sort of thing. But
right,
what's the biggest challenge in adding a character like Toby, who's multiply handicapped and nonverbal, into a story like this, especially a story that is so filled with tension and expectation for the reader?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because Toby is nonverbal and because he is so profoundly handicapped, he can't really do that much by himself, so that everything has to be done for him, and that's why Toby lives in a group home with other young men of his age. Toby is 20 in this book. So it's hard to make a rounded character out of Toby because he doesn't talk. He vocalizes, but he doesn't articulate things. He doesn't seem to be able to do things that we expect people to be able to do. He can't dress himself. He can't feed himself. He can't take care of himself in any way whatsoever. So the biggest challenge, I think, is making a character like that not only sympathetic but also rounded and a real person. One of the things I wanted to do with Toby is bring him into people's consciousness as a real person who has his own needs, who has his own desires, who has his own thoughts, and it's hard to get into that head of
Yeah,
Toby's.
I would think it would be, sure.
And Martin Pruss can't even do it. He can do it because he knows his son so well, and he can read his son's emotions so well on his face and in his body language. But there's a section in the book where he looks at Toby and he thinks, "You're a secret to me too, just like everybody is a secret to everybody else, and you're really a secret to me."
That's really a great corollary that you bring up in that, and I think that's why I really enjoy Toby as a character so much, is because you make him just like everybody else.
Yeah. He
is an enigma just like everybody else, and he is fully human just like everybody else. You know, it's I'm not sure who else I was speaking with about your books, but somebody said Toby is kind of like the sidekick character on one level to the Disney characters, where they have these sidekicks that don't speak, animals oftentimes. And I said, yeah, but that's so two-dimensional, and what Toby is so much more than that.
That's right. Toby is more than that, not only as a character in his own right, but he also fulfills an important role in the books for Martin Pruss.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw that in Accomplice that I just read, The Uncertain Accomplice.
Yeah.
The thing that I noticed in Uncertain Accomplice was that Toby can sometimes be a conduit for Martin's own understanding of not just the world in general, but the case he's working on.
That's right, because he uses Toby as a kind of sounding board. He spends as much time as he can with Toby. He goes to see him in the morning. He goes to see him at night to say goodnight to him.
They go on field trips together.
They go on field trips together. He takes them out to breakfast on Saturday. So he spends as much time as he can. He can't take care of Toby being a single parent. And he can't take Toby's and with when he was a police detective, he had a kind of crazy schedule, as you might expect. So he couldn't really take care of Toby. But Toby is not only his sounding board, but there's a kind of wisdom that emanates from Toby, as there was a wisdom that emanated from Jamie, who Toby is based on. And he seems to bring everybody around him up.
Sure.
He makes everybody more compassionate, kinder. He brings out this stuff in his father, and his father always wishes that he were as kind and as patient as Toby. He's always trying to learn from Toby.
Sure, yeah. Toby is, I think, the constant throughout the entire series. So let's talk about the series for a moment. There are now 6 books in the series.
Yes.
Starts with Crimes of Love.
Yes.
So can you just give us real quick your elevator pitch for Crimes of Love?
Crimes of Love is the first book in the series. It is about a 7-year-old girl who has epilepsy, who goes missing off the streets of Ferndale late one fall evening. And Martin Pruss, as a police detective, a fictional police detective, I hasten to add, with the Ferndale Police Department, is called out to look for her, along with all the other legion of police that are out in the street trying to find her. And the search for the little girl, as in all the books, opens up into larger issues and larger problems and larger concerns. And in the act of looking for this young woman, or this young girl actually, he finds out a lot of stuff about people's lives, specifically her parents. There's also a subplot in Crimes of Love, where there's a young man who is sort of on his own and lost in the world, and these two plot threads connect in a particularly interesting and dangerous way.
Okay, that's enough. Don't give away any more.
Okay, I won't.
Some of us out here haven't read it quite yet.
I won't, okay.
So Baker's Men is the second in the series.
Yes.
This is an ominous cover, I think. I think it's gently ominous, if I might. So give us a little bit of understanding what's going on in this story.
This story is about a shooting that happens in a bakery late one night in Ferndale.
Is this the Wonder Bread Bakery, maybe?
No, it's not the Wonder Bread Bakery. It's a fictional bakery, but it's a storefront. One of these storefront bakeries in Ferndale.
So often when people think bakery in Detroit, they think Wonder Bread.
Yeah,
so.
no, this is one of these artisan bakeries.
Got it.
So he's called out to find out what happened, and in this shooting there are a number of casualties. So the people who are involved are Iraq war vets. So there's a big question about what's going on here. Is it related to their status as Iraq war veterans? Is there a terrorist connection? Is it a drug deal gone bad? He's got to sort through all of these secrets and mysteries to find out what happened.
Those are a lot of details to get through. How do you, with each book, you add more details. There are more twists and turns, even with An Uncertain Accomplice, which is the book that I just finished reading, and I just loved it. But even with this book, as being the shorter of the 6, it still has a bunch of these little twists and turns, and for a moment I thought I knew what was going on, and then I found out I didn't know what was going on. So tell me a little bit about, if you can give away trade secrets, how do you come up with the layers that you create in your books? Do those happen organically, or do you purposefully look for those?
I think I purposely look to see how I can pull them out of the books. I think layers is a really good word to use because that's exactly how I look at it. It's not just a crime happens and the detective has to go out and find out what happens and solves the crime. There are layers of there are socioeconomic layers, there are political layers, there are family layers.
Right.
Everything at the heart of a lot of these books is the family. And what I try to do in these books is write not so much straight ahead mysteries, but I like to look at the society of the world of the book, if I can put it that way, through the lens of crime.
Okay.
And when you look at it that way, it becomes more complicated and more complex. And characters aren't just two-dimensional characters who serve the plot, but they're actually people who you could know. And I like to sort of do that. And one of the interesting things for me, and one of the most enjoyable things for me as I'm writing these, is letting those layers unfold themselves to me. I hardly ever start out knowing what those layers are going to be.
We've talked about this before, that you are what we in the industry call a pantser writer, not a plotter or an outliner. Yeah. You let the story come to you. Right. Throughout the process of writing. Yeah. Has it always been that way for you? Have you always been a seat-of-the-pants kind of writer? Or is this a technique that you developed after you gave up teaching and the more structured writing environment of writing for a living as you did for so long? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think the fiction that I write is usually that way, and the poetry is also that way. So the creative writing that I do is that way. When I do other kinds of writing, I was a professional writer for 20 years, right. And I wrote speeches, and I wrote grants, and I wrote video scripts, and I wrote almost annual reports, anything you can think of. I wrote, except journalism. I didn't do much in the way of journalism. Okay. But I was very planful when I did that kind of writing. I would always start with an outline, and I always knew what the piece was going to be about. For me, the hardest part in that kind of stuff, there are two hard parts in that kind of writing. One is getting the information, and two is figuring out how to deliver the information. And I used to tell my students, those are the two questions that a writer really has to deal with.
Absolutely.
What am I going to say and how am I going to say it?
Even in fiction.
Even in fiction, sure. Fiction, for a lot of that writing that I did was writing to order. I worked as the speechwriter for the commissioner of the health department in New York City for a number of years. And I would write sometimes 8 speeches a week for him because he was a very active guy in the community. And he thought public health was really a political process. So he was out always in the community trying to gain support for a lot of the programs that he was running.
I would think that would be super challenging.
It was super challenging, but I'll tell you, it was the best job I ever had.
Really?
Yeah, it was just the best job. I knew I was making a contribution in a really important way, really more important than I had ever felt before, I think. So I just loved it.
That's good to hear that something
Yeah.
politically circled could be a good thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So often anything that's connected with even slightly bent politics always ends up being a negative experience.
Yeah.
It's really nice to hear that you had an experience that wasn't negative and it still had a political bent to it.
Oh yeah. I mean, we were helping to improve people's lives, and I knew that, and I could see how that was happening.
So how did you transition from that planning, and you had to write to a specific purpose, to a specific endpoint? How did that kind of disappear, and now you're a pantser fiction writer? How did that happen?
That's another good question. I think it happened because I got tired of doing all that other stuff. I got tired of the writing that I was doing. I got tired of writing for other people, and I wanted to write for myself. I had done it for 20 years, 25 years, and I was ready for something new. So I had, at one point, many years ago in the 70s, I taught at Wayne State. I taught writing. And I started to think that maybe that would be a good thing to do again, with all the wealth of experience that I had gained as a professional writer. So I went back to graduate school, got my PhD, and got a job teaching. And the scholarly work that I had to do was actually very like the other kind of work. It's not a matter of pantsing it. It's a matter of researching it, planning it out, figuring out what you want to say, figuring out how to say it. I had always, in my heart, been a fiction writer. Even when I was writing poetry, I was writing narrative poetry. So
Okay.
I always loved stories. Even when I was a little boy, I wrote
I remember you
dragnet
talking about
scripts. Yeah.
stories from when you were very young.
Yeah. And I discovered, and I think it was probably because of the experience that I had had as a planner, I discovered that what I really loved to do when I was writing fiction was wing it and let the story unfold itself to me. Rather than plot it all out. I mean, I remember listening to I can't remember her name. Anyway, the famous writer who writes a book a week practically. Joyce Carol Oates.
Oh,
Sorry.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
There are many of those kinds of writers out there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, she came to Marygrove at one point, and I introduced her. And I remember she said that her way of going about it is she outlines it and then she writes it. What's a big deal?
That's that's kind of what I do. I outline it and I write it. Yeah, fill in the holes.
But I find that if that doesn't interest me, that doesn't I don't get the sense of discovery in writing scenes and in discovering what a character wants to do, as opposed to what I want the character to do. It's a lot more fun to just let it.
So
ride.
it's more about sitting back, listening to your characters, and taking dictation.
Sort of.
Writing up incidents reports, as I saw on a Facebook meme.
Yeah.
You just watch stuff happen and write the incident report.
That's sort of true. Although with the an incident report, I think is a good analogy for what I do because I'm working in a genre in the genre of mystery.
Sure.
My readers have certain expectations about what's going to happen. One of the expectations, is that they'll be tricked or that they'll be misdirected.
Right.
Let's say.
Right.
So I'm working with all these conventions of the genre, which I have to sort of make sure I take care of at the same time as I'm taking care of the other business that I want to talk about.
So we've got just a few minutes left, about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I want to talk about the event that you're going to do on Saturday.
Yes.
at, is it Color and Art Studio?
Color and Ink Studio.
Color and Ink Studio in Hazel Park.
In Hazel Park, on John R. in Hazel Park.
And that's at 2 o'clock on Saturday, May 11th.
Yes, it's the official book launch for Cold Dark Lies.
And rumor has it you're going to be playing music as well?
This is true. I'm going to be playing music with another author whose name is Tom Galasso. And he wrote a wonderful book called When the Swan Sings on Hastings Street. And I went to his book launch, or an event that he had in Hamtramck at the Hamtramck Library, and he had he did not only the typical kinds of things where you read from the book and you talk about the book and you do all that kind of stuff, but he also did a thing that I just found so fascinating. I loved it. I loved it so much I stole it immediately. He performed. He's a singer and a guitarist, and he brought some of his musical friends in to perform songs such as you might hear at this bar that he was talking about in his books. So I thought, I'm going to do that. And I asked him if he would help me for my last book launch.
Yeah, I remember the last book launch you both played. That was tremendous fun.
It was.
And the music fit wonderfully with the book.
Yeah.
It was a great tie-in. I'm so excited. I don't want you to give it away, but I'm really excited to see what you're going to do and how you're going to work this tie-in for this last book.
We're going to do 3 songs this time. We did 2 last time, so we're going to do 3.
Very fun.
And I'm playing the banjo. So that's
even better. Even better.
Cool.
You have multiple hidden talents that you just don't share with people on a regular enough basis, for my mind.
Yeah, I suppose.
So that's on Saturday.
Saturday, May 11th, right.
Okay. So you're going to be at some other places. May 18th, Rochester Heritage Days. You're going to be participating in the Pages Promotion Summer Book Fest, which I'm very excited to have you participate in.
Thank you.
And that's going to be May 22nd. And then you will also be in Fenton on July 13th and Sterling Fest July 27th.
Yes.
And it says here, Maine and Michigan Festival September 28th.
Yes, except the summer book fest is June 22nd, not May 22nd.
Oh, you're right.
You just missed
my
it.
mistake.
Yep.
Yeah, it happens all the time. So we've got just a few more minutes. We touched a little bit on the poetry that you write. I'm really interested to hear how, or even if it's a mild possibility, that one day, I read somewhere on your website, I believe today, that book 7 of Martin Proust might be in the works. Maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe, because I know you've been talking about maybe.
Yeah.
Do you ever envision a piece of your poetry ending up in a novel that you write?
No, I don't. I had at one time, actually within the last year, thought about putting a collection of my poetry together, because I've got, I have about 75 poems that are published, and I've got 2 short books of poetry that are out. So I was going to make a collection of poetry, and I was going to call it New and Selected Poems. But that's on the back burner now. I feel like that's more of a vanity project, because nobody buys poetry books. It's a
sad thing.
It
Poetry
is.
gets a bad rap. You know, now that Shakespeare's dead, nobody seems to be interested
I know.
anymore.
What's up with that? I know.
It's a sad thing.
Yeah.
But you don't see yourself ever using a piece of your poetry as a plot device in another novel? Maybe not the mystery series, but maybe in a different genre?
It's funny that you say that, because I was cleaning out my office at home today, and I found a poem that I wrote as a result of the story that led directly to Cold Dark Lies. I first heard of this story in a news report years and years and years and years ago, and it was one of these things, where you keep it in your back pocket, and sometime it's ready
someday
to come
it's going to show up.
And it showed up in a poem first.
Okay.
I wasn't happy with it in a poem. I mean, it was an okay poem, but I knew that there was more to it than could be covered in a poem. So the story that led to that poem actually finally led to Cold Dark Lies.
So it does kind of work that way.
They do work together. They do work together, yeah.
That's really interesting. The reason I ask is because I have a children's book that actually came out of a bigger novel. So
Okay.
I was curious if that was something that you had ever planned to do or envisioned doing. But it sounds like it almost worked the opposite, that the poem became the inspiration for the next novel.
Yeah, that's right. When I sat down to write one of the earlier books, I was on sabbatical from school, and I thought, well, I'll warm up every day by writing a poem, and then I'll work on the fiction. And that didn't work out so well because they're two different muscles in your brain. Yeah. So I stopped that very quickly.
So moving into the possibility of a book 7.
Yeah.
If you were going to do a book 7, it would be another Martin Proust book, right?
Yes.
Do you have a thought that maybe you might want to branch out and do a different genre? Is there another genre story that's tickling at the back of your brain that might happen?
Well, as a matter of fact, one of your other guests, Andrew Lark, invited me to take part in a book that he's putting together, a post-apocalyptic book that includes a piece by him and a piece by me and a piece by another author, Wendy Thompson.
That sounds like a fun project for the three of you.
Yeah. And when I was teaching, I did one of the last things I taught was a senior seminar in post-apocalyptic American fiction. So it's been a.
Wait a second. There's a course in that?
Oh yeah. Oh, it was a great course. And
that's phenomenal. That sounds like just like playtime all day long.
It was for me, not so much for the students. So that's the next thing up, and then I'll see. I'll see how Cold Dark Lies does, and then I'll make a decision about whether there's going to be another Proust. I love the characters. I love Toby. So
that's. Please don't let Toby go away.
Yeah,
I mean, he's so wonderful.
Yeah, thanks.
So in wrapping up, I just want to say thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you.
I really appreciate having you here. If anyone wants to find Donald Levin, you can be found at your website, which is donaldlevin.com.
donaldlevin.com.
Okay, and it's scrolling along on the bottom of the screen so people can write it down real fast for you.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Have an awesome evening.
You do the same.